Phil Porter, Takaraka Bush Resort, Carnarvon Gorge. We're heading up into Ward's Canyon. Ward's Canyon is a very, very special place in the gorge, and quite an interesting place too. Unfortunately, a lot of people who go up there don't fully understand what they are seeing in this area. You can see the waterfall. That's Algon Falls. It's an absolutely permanent waterfall because of the water seeping through the sandstone all the time. This waterfall is absolutely permanent. And you can clearly see in the rock behind the waterfall the layers of deposition in the rock. It was all deposited by rivers back about 180 million years ago. And you can see the lines of deposition almost perfectly horizontal. This area hasn't been uplifted because of buckling and twisting of the rock. It's actually just been uplifted as a whole rather than compression from the sides. You can see some of the blocks in the creek are very, very sharp angles. As the area is uplifting, it tends to split at right angles. You get these big natural fractures happening, and it makes the rock very, very weak in those areas. So here at 1 minute 30 in, you can see it really, really clearly on the rocks there too.
So you're saying these are sedimentary layers that we're seeing in these cliff layers, where the water's flowing down?
That's right.
Wow.
And each one of those small layers would basically probably represent a year or a season. During a wet season, you have a lot more material washed down and you get a thicker band forming. And then the dry season will come and you get just a very, very thin band. And then the next wet season you get another thick band and so on. And so in some places you can actually see the yearly layers in the rock and you can count the layers. And the gorge itself was probably somewhere in the order of about 30 million years of deposits. And this area being such a moist area, and the sunlight doesn't get in very often into Ward's Canyon at all, and so a lot of vegetation tends to thrive in here, especially ferns.
And I love this plant that's growing along the base of the waterfall.
Yeah.
And just life finds a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of fig trees, native fig trees in the area, and they just will do anything to get the water. And you can see in many places like this where the roots just go straight across and straight into a little gap in the rocks to get a grip on the rocks. The fig trees are particularly known for that. Also on the face of the waterfall there's a lot of little ferns growing there too, in fact several different species of ferns. Ward's Canyon is also quite well known for orchids too, and there's many species of orchids growing in there. We're just coming up towards the top of the waterfall and just about to enter Ward's Canyon itself. It's actually named Ward's Canyon after two brothers back in the early 1900s. Were possum hunters and they used to come into the area gathering possum skins. And there's all sorts of stories about them, and one says that they were doing a bit of illegal trapping. They're supposed to only, it was an open season, but these boys were coming up and trapping possums outside of that season. And they would hide them up in the canyon where they were out of the way and a nice cool area. Although sometimes you don't know exactly if the stories are quite right. We're just coming around the top of the waterfall now. And it's at this point, later in the year, around September, October, you tend to get a lot of orchids flowering and hanging down. You get dendrobium orchids hanging down off the sides of the cliffs. A lot of little ground orchids flowering too. The water here is absolutely crystal clear. It's just seeping directly out of the sandstone just up at the head of Ward's Canyon. And so the water just couldn't be any clearer. You can see a lot of the big palm trees. They're actually called a Carnarvon fan palm, and they're probably a remnant from a much wetter period. Also a lot of tree ferns as well. Because the sun hardly ever reaches the bottom of Ward's Canyon, and with the permanent water in there, it's always very, very cool in there. In fact, it's many, many degrees cooler in the canyon than it is outside. Beautiful place to be on a warm day. You can see how narrow the canyon is in places. There's big overhanging areas, almost like small open caves. Would have been a fantastic place for the Aborigines back in the early days. In fact, there are actually quite a few signs in the area of Aboriginal occupation. In some places the gorge is only a couple of metres across. The big ferns and the big palm trees in here, how they grow so tall and slender, it's simply because they have to go up as fast as they can to get to lie. So some of the ferns who will put their fronds, they'll just go straight up for a long, long distance, a lot higher than what they normally are further down in the gorge. Ward's Canyon is very well known for a small colony of king ferns. They're one of the largest of all the tree ferns in Australia, and they are also very much a remnant of a much, much wetter period. This is the only place inland that they're now found. They're only found in a few patches down along the coast. They need permanent water. If they dry out at all, they simply won't survive. And so this little pocket here, as Australia's gradually been drying out, they've died back, but this little pocket is still hanging on because they are just in permanent water. And they're very, very unusual to get them hundreds of kilometres away from where you would otherwise expect to find them. But there is other vegetation in this area that's a bit like that too. Sydney blue gums are actually found in fairly large numbers in the gorge. And that's the same sort of thing. It's sort of a remnant population that would have been left over from a much wetter period in the Earth's history. The king ferns basically come straight out of the ground. They don't actually have a trunk. The branches come almost straight out from the ground. They're very, very susceptible to damage by people walking near them, and so some of the canyon is now no longer accessible. They've had to close it off because the king ferns were dying. The king ferns can be a huge distance across. They can cover almost up to 10 metres across. You'll see at the top of the gorge trees lying across it, and that happens quite commonly too. You get trees dying up above, and sometimes they fall into the gorge, and sometimes they just simply fall straight across the top. The canyon being so narrow.
It's amazing how sanctuaries just so near absolute oblivion for these plants, isn't it?
Yeah,
You just look above you and it's a kind of dry chlorophyll up
right.
there,
Yeah.
and just hidden away. You've got these few individuals remaining.
Yeah, they are very, very vulnerable to not only people walking on them, but to our climate as well. It's why this little patch is the only pocket known that survives in the area, because it's just always the permanent water and very low light levels, which they tend to love as well.
So they were encountering sauropods.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this vegetation would have been around at the time of dinosaurs.
And specifically the genus or the species, which is
Probably more the genus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fronds are quite different to other ferns as well, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they are. They're very, very distinctive fern. When you see them, you know immediately when you're looking at them. They're quite different to most other ferns. They actually do look ancient.
Mm.
As do the cycads as well, the macrosomia and the cycads. They are a very, very ancient plant and actually do tend to look ancient too. You can almost imagine dinosaurs roaming around through them.
And is there evidence as to how long this say colony of these ferns has existed in
I don't know that anyone's ever done any work with them, but it'd be a long, long time. It'd be thousands and thousands of years. Yeah, they once would have been quite widespread because it was a much wetter climate back then. But then as the climate's dried out, they've sort of gradually died back into little patches where there's permanent water. And that's why this one is so isolated. The cycad in this area has been isolated for quite some time too, for a similar sort of reason, and that has actually formed its own species. It's Macrosomia morii, which is a different species to a lot of the other cycad further out to the east. Our palm trees here are the same too, the Carnarvon fan palm. They've been trapped here long enough to actually form their own species.
Yeah.
In the creek in Ward's Canyon, you see a bright red colouring on the rocks in the water. And a lot of people tend to think it's iron staining in the rocks, but it's actually a red water lichen. It's actually growing on the rocks. And it loves very, very clean water. In fact, it's I believe a very good indication of extremely healthy, clean water. But it also likes very, very low light levels. And in Ward's Canyon, the rocks tend to be covered in this really bright red. You will see it a little bit in some other places up in Carnarvon Gorge as well, but you'll never see it out in the open. It's always in these dark little side canyons. Yeah, Ward's Canyon is a really beautiful place. It's probably most people who come to Carnarvon Gorge actually come back and say that Ward's was their favourite place in the gorge. It's a very special place.